Quick announcement before the video begins. I shall be attending 2 mini-games in Philadelphia this year between the 24th and 26th of June. I don't have a panel or anything, I'm just going to attend the convention to have a good time, meet friends, fans and other YouTubers I greatly admire. So if you're going to be in attendance, please keep an eye out for me. And to make things easier, I'll be cosplaying as Victor Belmont and the Radiant hero Ike during my stay. Now since I'll be abroad during this time, I won't be able to work on any Fire Emblem Warriors Free Hopes related videos until I return, but I'll be sure to make notes in preparation for when I get back to work. Plus on my Twitch, you can view my stream of the demo to get my initial thoughts. With that out of the way, on with the video. If you've been on the internet for more than 24 hours, then you should have at minimum heard of the concept of fanfiction. After all, there seems to be a fic for just about any franchise, no matter how obscure. And you can bet your bullion, Fire Emblem is no stranger to this concept, especially concerning Fate's rewrites because God knows the official narrative left a lot to be desired. Now, truth be told, I don't really write fanfics outside of the how to improve videos I've made, and even then, those were more so bullet point changes as opposed to actual rewrites. But I'm always the type to think of various different what-if scenarios, so I figured I'd throw my hat into the ring and propose a Free Houses fanfic. Heck, Koei's already 3 steps ahead with Free Hopes, so might as well get the ball rolling. Due to the nature of Free Houses' plot structure, the whole game is basically one giant what-if, but for this fic in particular, we're going to have to climb that paywall and explore a concept featured within the DLC Cindered Shadows, that being the revival of Byleth's mother Sitri, which ultimately ended in failure. But what if it didn't? How would the outcome of Free Houses change if Sitri returned to the world of the living, and what sort of impact would she have on the cast and Fodland as a whole? This is what today's fanfiction is all about, and for now, I'll be covering the events that lead up to the battle in the Holy Tomb, since that's where the story splits drastically, and if we reach a like goal of 2,000 likes, I'll write a follow-up for all 4 pathways, 500 likes for each one. So please be sure to give this video a like and subscribe as well, as it really helps out the channel. Also for this fic, I won't assign Byleth to a particular house, so as to leave things more open to interpretation. Before we get started, I do have to stress that this is not a how to improve video, since for one thing, I don't take issue with the majority of Free Houses writing. This is merely an alternate universe scenario where Sitri is revived and what I feel would happen as a result of her resurrection. Additionally, I feel some backstory and clarification is needed in order to quote-unquote justify how the events going forward play out. So to begin with, while there's various points of contention regarding how Cindered Shadows ties into the plot of Free Houses if at all, I've decided to insert this particular side story after chapter 4 and before the fight with Miklan in chapter 5. For Byleth already has the Sword of the Creator and the Death Knight is still present within Garreg Mach. When it comes to Sitri herself, for those who are not aware, she is the canonical mother of Byleth and the wife of Jeralt. During her life she acted as a nun at Garreg Mach, and the 12th vessel for Sophis created by Rhea, who planned to revive her mother using the Crest Stone of Flames. Sitri was unable to resonate with the Crest Stone, leading her to become weak and frail, so she rarely left the monastery and was rather sheltered. But despite never hearing Sophis at all, she was very close to Rhea, Alfric and Jeralt, as she considered the Archbishop to be a mother of sorts, Alfric a dear friend, and eventually fell in love with Jeralt and became pregnant with his child. After giving birth to Byleth and discovering they had no heartbeat, she asked Rhea to give Byleth her crest stone despite being in critical condition, and after the transplant was successful, she died shortly afterwards. Sitri was known to be a very kind and gentle woman who had a fondness for flowers and literature. Since she could not leave the monastery, she became enthralled by stories of the outside world, especially from Jeralt, and though she had trouble emoting much like her offspring, she was very lively around him. It should be noted that even without hearing the voice of Sophis, Sitri's hair was naturally green, and her body did not decompose after 20 years, which has led people to speculate that she has a similar physiology to the children of the goddess, much like Rhea, but nothing is official. Sitri's death caused a huge rift between Geralt and Alfric regarding how they felt towards Rhea, as neither of which knew that Sitri willingly gave up her life to save Byleth. And though she had a funeral and gravestone, she was never officially buried, but rather preserved within the Abyss, where Rhea would visit her frequently. This is where Cindered Shadows comes into play, as the events of said side story, acted as a means for Alfric to revive Sitri using the Rite of Rising ritual, a ceremony that involves using the blood of the 4 apostles as a way to bring back the dead, as 1,000 years prior, Seros attempted to return Sophis to the world of the living using said rite, but it failed due to the lack of blood required and was thus sealed away. During Cindered Shadows, the Ashen Walls are descendants of the 4 saints, and despite getting enough blood to fill the chalice, the ritual still fails and causes both Alfric and Sitri to become consumed by the goblet and transformed into an umbral beast, and once defeated, Sitri is buried for good, and it's here where our story will take a different turn. After dealing the final blow to the umbral beast, it weakly falls to the floor, and the group braces themselves for the body to dissolve, and as it does, they once again gaze upon the body of Sitri. However, Alfric is nowhere to be seen. No clothes, no bones, not even a speck of dust remains that resembles him. Rhea explains the circumstances of Byleth's birth, who throughout this fic I'm going to refer to as female purely out of preference, and her mother's final moments as normal, growing sadder with each sentence, and then deciding that she should be buried properly this time, that Sitri deserves to rest in peace and not risk the chalice being used again. Rhea orders for the students to retrieve her body, with Dimitri going to collect her corpse, but as the prince goes to lift her up, he suddenly stops, leaning his body forward and placing his head on her chest. All the students are slightly puzzled by the way the prince is behaving, with Byleth also bewildered, while Rhea is visibly disturbed by the prince's actions.
What on earth are you doing, boy? How dare you desecrate her body in such a disrespectful manner? Have you no—
Before Rhea can finish, Dimitri quickly interjects.
Archbishop, you misunderstand. I simply need to be sure that what I felt wasn't my imagination.
The entire room suddenly becomes very tense, as everyone shares the same look of shock and surprise on their face, as they're all coming to the same conclusion, but don't know how to react. Claude then chimes in, his voice layered with disbelief and uncertainty.
Dimitri, you're not suggesting that.
I know, Claude. It doesn't seem possible. It's very faint, but this woman, Sitri, I mean, she's breathing.
Everyone gasps, but before they can put their hands to their mouths, Rhea bolts towards Sitri at inhuman speed, with Byleth following behind her after taking a second to process Dimitri's words. And as Seros approaches, she shoves Dimitri away and cradles Sitri in her arms, sending the prince flying into the nearest wall with a loud crash. Everyone is still trying to process the fact that Sitri is breathing, with Edelgard being the only one to notice the state Dimitri's in and quickly goes to his aid.
Dimitri, are you hurt? You hit the wall with such force, I'm surprised you're still conscious.
Ugh! I'm fine, Edelgard. I appreciate your help, but I shouldn't be your main
As Dimitri begins to stand, he quickly loses his footing, with Edelgard catching him and slowly lifts the prince to his feet as he leans on her for support.
Don't overdo it, Your Highness. It's a miracle you can still move after all that.
Edelgard then turns to Rhea, her eyes now filled with both anger and concern.
What is the meaning of this, Archbishop? You could have seriously injured Dimitri, and what's more, how did you manage to throw a man of his size like you were little more than a skipping stone?
Rhea is not listening. Both her and Byleth are completely transfixed on Sitri as she lays in Rhea's arms, with each breath becoming faintly louder as Rhea places her hand on Sitri's forehead and surrounds it in an aura of white magic, with Byleth clasping her mother's hand and trembling in anticipation. After what feels like an eternity, Rhea removes her hand, and as she does, Sitri's eyes begin to flutter. Tears begin swelling in Rhea's eyes, with the Archbishop barely able to remain still, and soon Sitri's eyes open for the first time in over 20 years. At first, everything is a blur to Sitri, and she can't make sense of her surroundings. All she can make out are 2 shapes looking down on her. She then feels something soft and wet hit her cheeks as Rhea begins to cry, and steadily, Sitri regains her composure, recognizing the Archbishop not just from her face, but the feeling of being cradled in her arms, that soft, gentle warmth she remembered so fondly, with her memories coming back piece by piece as she weakly leans forward and says,
Rhea?
The Archbishop can't hold back her emotions any longer, shedding such intense tears of joy upon seeing Sitri alive once again and hearing her call out her name. Rhea then pulls Sitri in close and wraps her in such a warm embrace, barely being able to form a sentence, constantly stumbling over her words, with Sitri gently hugging her back and saying that it's good to see you again. Rhea slowly pulls back, smiling so vibrantly and trying to dry her eyes and control herself, with Sitri contentedly giggling at seeing the Archbishop in such a state. But then her attention is drawn to the woman sitting beside her. During this time, Byleth is struggling to process this sudden miracle, and upon locking eyes, neither of them know how to react, with Rhea also unsure of what to say and looking rather nervous. But after a few moments of silence, Sitri gently touches the woman's cheeks and utters one word.
Byleth?
Upon hearing her mother say her name for the first time, a newfound energy stirs within the professor as she smiles and nods her head. And despite only coming back to life minutes ago, Sitri lunges forward and practically falls into her daughter's arms as the two of them embrace tenderly, with Rhea looking over them so contently while the remaining students are still trying to piece everything together, though they can't help but feel elated by such a tender scene and this once-in-a-lifetime miracle. And even though what Rhea did is nagging at the back of both Dimitri and Edelgard's mind, even they are swept up in the moment and look at each other, exchanging a small smile between the two before turning back to the professor and her mother. Once all the emotions have subsided, the events of Cindered Shadows are wrapped up, and Sitri is taken back to the monastery and immediately placed in the infirmary to ensure that she remains healthy, with the chalice also being stored away. As though Sitri's resurrection was a phenomenon, Rhea can only theorize that when the umbral beast fell, all of Alfric's life essence went into Sitri, which explains why only her body was left behind while he vanished completely, and trying to attempt the rite again would more than likely end in failure. While she is recovering, Rhea, Byleth, Manuela and other healers stay by Sitri's side, with Rhea being overwhelmed with joy at Sitri's return, though Byleth remains conflicted about the situation, since she really didn't know her mother at all. Sitri notices the unease on Byleth's face, and so takes the initiative in trying to bond with her daughter, asking her about her life story and the tales of her escapades as a mercenary. To Byleth, this all seems very mundane, but Sitri is fascinated by her daughter's words, and seeing her so invested in Byleth's life does help to bridge the gap between them. Elsewhere within Geralt Mark, the ones present during Cindered Shadows do what they can to keep what happened regarding Sitri a secret as ordered by Rhea, but they can't help but be amazed at what transpired and also have mixed feelings about being all hush-hush with such life-changing news.
To think that even though he lost everything, Alfric's plan ended up working. As much as I hate to admit it, I've got to give the man major props.
While the gift of life is a wondrous miracle, I find it highly unacceptable to offer that man any sort of praise. Had there been no intervention, both Balthus and Happy, and more importantly myself, would no longer walk this earth, which is hardly a fair trade. More importantly, you really do think the world of yourself, don't you, Coco? Regardless of what went down, I'm just happy we all made it out okay and that the professor got their mom back. It's not every day you get a second chance at life.
No kidding. Man, if only I had that kind of luck with gambling. And to think that the professor's mother would be such a gorgeous woman. I can see why Elfric was so smitten, the old dog.
Balthus, is your mind even aware what comes out of your mouth? I'm all for a good chuckle, but there's a time and place, dude. Plus, did you forget that Sitri is technically married?
Actually, I've been thinking about that. I know we're supposed to keep this all secret for now, but don't you think it's unfair to hide this news from Geralt? It doesn't feel right to lie about something like this. I know how much it hurts to lose a loved one, so if anything, Geralt should be the first to know.
I understand how you feel, Ash, and your heart is in the right place. It doesn't sit well with me either. But this news is huge, and like Rhea said, seeing Jeralt right away might be too much for Sitri to handle right now.
I don't know. I mean, Sitri didn't seem that shocked at being brought back from the dead or seeing her daughter all grown up. Heck, being reunited with her husband can make her so much healthier and happier at the same time. That sounds so romantic.
I, for one, find it absurd. It's not like Sitri can be kept a secret forever, and as her husband, Geralt has the right to know immediately.
While the students discuss the situation among themselves, Alois is being uncharacteristically non-hyperverbal, as the guilt of not saying anything to and avoiding the captain is eating away at him. Elsewhere, Geralt is confused as to Byleth and Rhea's whereabouts. He hasn't seen them for hours, and even the students aren't aware of where they've gone. It would be one thing for the pair to be absent individually, but at the same time and with no one else knowing, it's no coincidence, and so he seeks to consult Setheth about the situation, and wouldn't you know it, Setheth is just as suspicious, having not seen Rhea and the Professor anywhere, and there are no records or appointments within the time frame that require either of them to be absent.
I find the situation at hand to be highly suspicious. You're certain none of the students have seen either the Professor or Rhea?
Positive. I asked all of them, but they came up with nothing. In fact, most seem just as confused as me about Byleth's absence. There's something more to what's going on that we're being kept in the dark about.
I concur, and frankly, I'd like to get to the bottom of this. So far, I haven't yielded much information. The only lead I have is that the infirmary has been locked down and no one is allowed to enter. My guess would be that someone is in a critical condition.
It's a possibility, but none of the knights I've worked with recently have been injured to such a degree, and all the students are present and accounted for. And like you said, there's been no missions within these last few days, at least none on record. Plus, if the Professor or Rhea were in such a state, the whole monastery would know.
Setheth begins to ponder to himself. He knows Rhea likes to keep her secret, but this is strange even for her.
Looks like we'll have to broaden our search. This might be a hassle, but I feel we should ask everyone in Garreg Mach about what's going on.
Jeralt breathes a heavy sigh.
That certainly is a hassle. But I won't lie and say that just sitting around waiting is a better alternative. I'll start by talking to the knights, see what info you can get from the other employees here. I'll meet back with you before nightfall.
And so, the two of them split up and begin their investigation. As they suspected, the masses don't have a clue as to what's going on, but every now and then, someone mentions rumors of a fight breaking out in the Abyss, and that Rhea was seen entering alongside some of the knights, and more importantly, Alois. The two of them meet up that evening and exchange information, and since Alois is a common factor, they both head to confront him regarding the whereabouts of Rhea and Byleth.
Oh, Captain Geralt, good to see you, sir. And, Setheth too. What a surprise. What can I do for you, old-timer? Just give it to me straight, Alois. Where's Rhea and Byleth? They've been absent for a suspiciously long time. The Archbishop? Sorry, Captain,
Setheth cuts him off before he can even get started.
There's no need to dance around the question, Alois. We've asked around, and your name keeps popping up regarding Rhea heading into the Abyss. Now, what happened down there, and where are the Professor and Archbishop currently residing?
Alois's entire body sinks as he looks down with his head in shame.
I'm sorry, Captain. I wanted to tell you straight away, but Rhea was adamant that neither I nor the students say a word about her.
Both men look at each other as paranoia starts to kick in.
Her? Where's Rhea and my daughter, Alois? They're both in the infirmary.
Setheth's eyes widen, thinking the worst.
My gods. Are they?
No, they're perfectly fine. It's just that... Well... It's Sitri, Captain. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but she's alive again.
Jeralt can't believe what he's hearing. His brain is telling him that this can't be possible. She died years ago. But he's known Alois long enough to tell that there isn't a shred of doubt or malicious intent in his words. And with that, Geralt makes a break for the infirmary, with Setheth taking a few seconds to realize what's happened and chases after him. As Geralt charges towards the infirmary, the guards try to stop him, but he crashes right through them and bursts through the door, shocking everyone as he frantically looks around the room, as he soon locks his gaze with Sitri's. The whole room freezes, and for a while no one says a word, with the only sound being Geralt's heavy breathing echoing throughout the chamber. Sitri then breaks the silence by making a joke about how Geralt looks after all this time, and that he should lay off the booze. Geralt begins to make his way over to his wife, but is barely able to stand, still in shock at seeing the woman he adored among the living once again. Byleth goes over to her father and helps him towards Sitri as he embraces her, the two of them crying immensely at being reunited once again. And Byleth, having never seen her father so happy before, is overcome with joy, joining her parents in a tender embrace. As the family hold each other close, Rhea orders the others to leave, with Setheth waiting outside, having seen and heard everything and wishing to speak to Rhea privately. Chihol and Ceres head to her quarters, where she catches him up to speed on the events of Cindered Shadows and who Sitri is. Setheth is unsurprisingly struggling to comprehend all this information, though he is particularly curious about the rite of rebirth. But before he gets any ideas, Rhea assures him that what happened with Sitri should not have worked, and it's only accidental that she came back to life, and that it's highly unlikely that the same will occur with his wife, going so far as to inform him about the time she attempted to use the chalice to revive Sophis, but due to the ritual failing, she never again attempted to make use of it. Sephiroth is admittedly distraught about his hopes being immediately cut down, but accepts Rhea's words, and though he is concerned about the fact that Rhea attempted to revive Sophis, for her to never endeavour using the chalice again is more than enough reassurance to forget about the rite. Later that evening, Byleth, Sitri, Jeralt and all the students who were present during Cindered Shadows meet with Rhea and Sephiroth. Flayn is also among them, who from a single glance instantly takes a liking to Sitri, and she too is drawn to Flayn, as the two lock eyes and smile at each other warmly. Rhea addresses the entire congregation and makes it clear that they cannot let anyone else in the monastery know about the rite of rising, for doing so would put all the Ashen Rules in danger, and the idea of reviving the dead would throw Fodlan into chaos. She then informs them that tomorrow, Sitri will be allowed to roam freely around Geralt Mark, and that the reason for her return is due to her health improving as she was suffering from an illness and was being treated all these years in secret until she recently recovered from it. All the students begin to exchange glances with one another, and Rhea can see that there's doubt among them. She then informs the student body to speak up regarding their qualms with her proposition. Edelgard then steps forward.
With all due respect, Lady Rhea, while I understand the need to keep the rite a secret for the sake of the Ashen Wolf's safety, surely the situation with Alfric is reason enough to come forward with the truth regarding the rite and the chalice. After all, it's often due to rumors and a lack of information that people will seek to uncover the truth and take such dangerous risks based on hearsay.
I too share Edelgard's thoughts on the matter. People are already spreading rumors about what's happening down the Abyss, and if we keep our mouths shut, it's only going to get more and more complicated until someone gets the wrong idea.
While I'm not on the exact same page as my fellow house leaders, they do have a point regarding how dangerous rumors can be in an attempt to conceal the truth, even if the fact of the matter is hazardous in nature.
I cannot deny that acting in this manner may lead to possible conflict in attempt to make use of the chalice, but were the world to know of its true intentions, I fear it would only be a matter of time before those of a misguided nature seek the chalice for use on a monumental scale, which would be catastrophic. I also fear for Sitri's life, as there are those who would seek to discover the means of her resurrection by any means necessary.
Constance then interjects.
On the subject of the professor's mother, I find the story you propose regarding her recovery to be questionable at best. After all, you haven't mentioned what she was suffering from and why it took so long to be cured. Naturally, you could make the argument that Sitri's illness had to be contained so as to not spread infection. However, this raises the question as to why Jeralt would leave the monastery for all these years and take Sitri's child with him. Any decent person would want to stay within close proximity of a loved one for support, so the idea of the captain leaving for 20 years and raising the professor on his own is a highly far-fetched notion.
Also, if I may chime in, even if Sitri couldn't see them, surely knowing that both her husband and her daughter are close would be the ideal way to keep her spirits lifted, right? After all, they say that illness fails in the face of a strong heart.
Before Rhea can respond, Geralt takes a step forward, his face contorted into a frown and taking a far more poised stance than normal.
Since I'm such a hot topic of discussion, I think you owe me an explanation as to why you didn't inform me immediately that Sitri was alive.
Sephiroth then looks at Rhea, not saying a word, but Geralt's feelings are reflected in his eyes. Rhea is beginning to become frustrated, but she remains composed and lets out a very heavy sigh.
I understand your frustration, Jeralt, but I wanted to make sure that Sitri was stable before reuniting the two of you. You know that Sitri is naturally frail and all the excitement could have been too much for her. In regards to the circumstances of her return, since she was already pronounced dead in the past, that can easily be used as a way to act as a cover-up for keeping her locked away until she got better, and why no one would disturb her as she recovered.
Once again, everyone looks unsure about Rhea's excuse, but then Sitri grasps Geralt's hand and assures him that it's okay. She then turns to everyone and lets them know that she's fine with the story Rhea has put forth.
Thank you all for being so concerned about me. I'm honestly not fussed about the validity of my rebirth, and it's very touching that you all want to ensure the circumstances of my reappearance feel legitimate. You're all such thoughtful and kind young men and women, so thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so invested in my well-being. But please have faith in Lady Rhea.
Sitri's words do ease the tension in the room significantly, and they all decide to go along with the plan, with Rhea once again smiling warmly, witnessing Sitri's plight. With that, they all leave. but Alois is asked to stay behind, as Rhea questions him as to why he told Jeralt the truth.
Forgive me, Lady Rhea, but I couldn't in good conscience lie to the captain about something so important. He's my best friend, Archbishop, and he above everyone deserved to know about what had happened to his wife.
Rhea then angrily scolds Alois.
Do you know what could have happened if Sitri got too worked up from seeing Geralt so suddenly? It's a miracle that she was revived, but that doesn't mean she's in any sort of stable condition. Sitri is frail by nature. Had the shock been too much, then not only would she have died twice, but Jeralt would blame himself for her death. What you did was monumentally idiotic. As a Knight of Saros, I would expect of better than you than to—
Just then, Sefeth interrupts and admits that he was also with Geralt at the time and wished to know what was going on, aiding him in collecting information regarding sightings of Rhea heading into the Abyss and Alois being present alongside her, so as to squeeze the truth out of him, with Rhea simply staring at Sefeth with both confusion and a hint of anger, at which point she dismisses them both. Meanwhile, Sitri and Jeralt retreat to their quarters for the night, and as Byleth heads back to their room, she hears Sophis talking in her head, mentioning that something about Sitri feels familiar, even though she doesn't remember her face, just that her presence has an air of familiarity to it. But for now, Byleth doesn't think much of it. The next day, Rhea makes an announcement to Garrick Mark about Sitri, and a special celebration is held where all the students get a day off from studying to meet Byleth's mother, all of which are very interested to see her, with the typical responses like Balthus and Sylvain making lewd jokes, Marianne and Bernadetta being shy but also drawn to her, Dudu and Felix keeping their distance, etc. And though the experience is exhausting, Sitri is overwhelmed with joy at meeting all the students, fascinated by their stories, even if it's only surface level stuff, and so happy to hear what everyone has to say about the professor. After the celebrations are over, things start to return to the usual business, and Sitri spends most of her time within Garrick Mark, acting as a nun once again. Only now, Rhea stays by her side very often, but whenever Geralt isn't assigned to a mission, or Byleth isn't busy teaching, they make spending time with her a priority, with her love for them both growing stronger all the time, and Byleth also becoming far more expressive around her mother. Sitri also spends her time with the students, both Manuela and Hanneman, and other members of the Knights like Alois, Sefeth, Shamir, and Catherine when they're not busy. However, Sitri is particularly drawn to Flayn, for the young lady is naturally curious about this newcomer, and due to Sitri's appearance and mannerisms, Flayn can't help but see something of her own mother's reflection at times, plus Sitri's own maternal instincts cause her to dote on and somewhat favour Flayn. Plus, since at this point in time, Flayn isn't part of any of the three houses, she's able to spend the most amount of time with Sitri next to Rhea. The two of them learn that they both came from similar circumstances, of a sheltered life and wanting to know more about the outside world, with Flayn telling Sitri stories of her life by the coast and even her fear of closing her eyes. And though Sitri doesn't tell Flayn about the truth behind Byleth, she does recollect the various tales Geralt relayed to her and what Garrick Mark was like before she and Sefeth arrived, even going so far as to take up fishing. And though she's not very good at it, Flayn is overjoyed at simply being able to enjoy this activity alongside Sitri. As the end of the month approaches, Byleth begins to head towards Conan Tower for her mission to retrieve the hero's relic from Miklan, but before Byleth departs, Sitri asks the professor to be careful and stay safe. Byleth at first brushes it off as nothing, but then she looks at her mother and notices that she's genuinely worried for her safety, clasping Byleth's hands and trembling slightly. Byleth isn't used to someone being so concerned for their well-being, having grown up without a mother, and Geralt being somewhat distant in nature, making Sitri's fear about her safety difficult to process. Byleth, not wanting her mother to fret, brings her close and reassures her that she'll be careful and come home safely. This helps to put Sitri's mind at ease, and as they all depart, Flayn grabs Sitri's hand and smiles, and though she doesn't say anything, the simple act is more than enough to give Sitri peace of mind. The battle within the tower proceeds as it does in canon, and upon returning, Sitri is the first to greet Byleth and check on her to make sure she's okay, being quite thorough when inspecting her daughter for any injuries.
Come on, Mother, there's no need to be so worried about me. See? I'm absolutely fine.
I just want to be sure, darling. I can't believe Rhea would assign you and the students with such a dangerous mission. This is something the Knights should do, not children.
It's all part of their training, Mother. Plus, they're very capable, and I've worked long enough as a mercenary to know if there was something we couldn't handle.
Sitri then steps back and feels there's nothing to worry about, but then notices that Byleth has a cold sweat on them and suddenly becomes concerned again, insisting that she tell her what's the matter. Byleth initially doesn't want the news to shock her mother, but she knows that if she stays silent, it will only make things worse. So she informs Sitri about what happened with Miklan, and Sitri gasps at what Byleth just told her, but is glad that her child is safe and that she should ask Rhea if she happens to know anything about this phenomena. At that point, Sophis says her piece about the transformation, and Byleth utters,
"I'm not sure,"
catching Sitri off guard, but Byleth quickly regains her composure and brushes it off, heading to report the situation to Rhea. After disclosing the events that took place to Rhea, Sitri meets Byleth again and asks if the Archbishop cleared things up, to which Byleth assures her that she did, explaining that people without crests will undergo the same transformation as Miklan were they to use a hero's relic. This naturally relieves Sitri, and she remarks how this should deter people from stealing heroes' relics from now on. Byleth then nervously looks towards the ground, with Sitri confused as to why she became so sullen. Byleth hesitantly tells her mother that Rhea forbid Byleth from informing others about this, which only serves to puzzle Sitri, who feels that the world needs to know about the truth of the hero's relics, otherwise this may happen again. Byleth nods but doesn't wish to disobey Rhea and is overall unsure about the situation at hand. Sitri notices the conflict in Byleth's body language and says that it's okay, they'll both stay quiet about what happened with Miklan, though doing so doesn't sit well with either of them. As the month of the Horsebow Moon begins, Rhea is about to assign Byleth with their next mission, but Sephiroth storms in panicking and asking for Flame's whereabouts, with Rhea calming him down and having Sephiroth catch them up to speed on the situation. Once they've been informed of Flame's disappearance, Byleth is quick to suggest that they ask Sitri, since Flame spends a lot of time with her, so she'd be their best lead. Upon the mention of Sitri's name, Sephiroth grits his teeth and explains that they also can't find Sitri either, shocking Byleth and causing Rhea to start panicking. She immediately orders Sephiroth to assemble all the knights and for Byleth to gather the students and begin searching for them both. But before they move out, the door opens and the respective Rout and House Lord informs all three of them that they found Manuela, who had been stabbed and is now in the infirmary. All of them rush to meet the two other lords, along with Manuela, who is lying down and breathing heavily, clutching her side where the stab wound is. She weakly explains the situation to the group.
Professor, Sedith, Lady Rhea, my apologies. I couldn't rescue them. He was too strong.
What happened, Manuela? Who did this to you?
When I happened past Jaritz's room, I heard strange noises. I went to investigate and I found both Flame and Sitri being held captive. Before I could free them, the Death Knight showed up. I tried to fight back, but he was too strong.
She then chuckles and looks at Byleth.
Had it not been for your mother's intervention, I'd probably be dead right now. Thanks to her, I just barely managed to escape. Though, as you can see, I didn't get off scot-free.
The whole group is stunned upon this revelation, with looks of dread, anger, confusion, and so on across all their faces. Rhea asks where the Death Knight took the two of them, and Manuela says that there's a secret passage in Yuritsa's room that leads underground. She then proceeds to faint. Rhea quickly assigns Byleth to take the remaining students to confront the Death Knight, while herself and Sephiroth assemble the Knights of Seros. All the while the three lords are tasked with taking care of Manuela until she stabilizes. Once Byleth gathers the students, they head to Yuritsa's room and follow the passage underground. There they find Flame, Sitri, and another woman who we all know to be Monica, but more importantly, the Death Knight is there, along with members who appear to be the people who raided the monastery during the Rite of Rebirth. The battle plays out mostly the same, however this time, Byleth, now filled with rage for what the Death Knight did to her mother, attacks him while the students hang back and deal with the remaining foot soldiers. And while the professor's efforts are commendable, their anger causes them to fight with needless exertion and ferocity, allowing the Death Knight to easily overwhelm Byleth, knocking her into the air and flinging the Sword of the Crater from their grasp.
Such a pity. To think that the wielder of such a powerful weapon would be little more than small fry. Now, you will die together. How joyous.
Before the Death Knight can bring his scythe down upon Byleth, it is swiftly parried and Yuritsa jumps back, with Byleth looking up to see two figures in front of her facing down the Death Knight, being none other than Sephiroth and Jeralt.
Try not to be so reckless, kiddo. I know you're angry, but you're no use to anyone dead.
Go, now! Make sure the students are safe. We'll handle this fiend.
The Death Knight chuckles, thinking little of either of them, but is happy to spill their blood for his amusement, though the masked terror ends up being mistaken about his preconceptions, as while individually they are no match for him. Together the two complement each other beautifully, providing openings and keeping the Death Knight on his toes, with Sephiroth primarily focusing on attacking, while Jeralt supports him and quick to parry each of the Death Knight's strikes. As things continue, the Death Knight's bloodlust becomes even stronger, and the two of them are starting to be put on the defensive. But they notice that he's so overcome with murderous intent, his composure is breaking. The two then look at each other and nod, with Sephiroth charging in with a powerful attack that's easily deflected by the Death Knight, who then slices Sephiroth in the back, with Sephiroth just barely getting far enough away for the wound to not be fatal. While the Death Knight gloats at Sephiroth's poor performance, Chico goes in for another swing, with the Death Knight moving back to avoid the attack, but before he goes to strike Sephiroth again, he notices that the man is grinning and looking past him, instead focusing his attention on Jeralt, who is charging towards the Death Knight, and even though he tries to get out of the way, it's too late. Jeralt smashes his lance across the Death Knight's face, knocking him off his horse and breaking his mask. At this point, all the enemies have been dealt with, and so everyone is able to observe Jeralt's attack and is shocked at not only how powerful Jeralt is, but also the reveal that the Death Knight is Yuritsa, at which point Mercedes shakily walks forward and calls out to Emil, but before she can get any closer, the Flame Emperor appears and commands Yuritsa to flee, at which point they both vanish. Geralt goes over to Byleth to make sure she's okay, and the others tend to Sephiroth, using their magic to heal him. Once he's recovered, he approaches Mercedes.
Excuse me, Mercedes. I couldn't help but notice that after the Death Knight's true identity was revealed, you called out to him by the name Emil. What exactly did you mean by that?
Mercedes looks down in a melancholy fashion.
Emil is Yuritsa's real name. He was born of House Bartels and is my half-brother. We grew up together, but after my mother and I left in 1167, I haven't seen or heard from him since I enrolled here.
Before Sephiroth can ask any further questions, Rhea suddenly appears with the Knights of Seros and is quickly brought up to speed on the situation, learning that Yuritsa is the Death Knight and the one responsible for kidnapping Flame and Sitri, including injuring Sephiroth, Manuela, and Byleth. She then turns to Mercedes and glares at her.
You, Miss Martreats, it appears that you seem to know a great deal about Professor Yuritsa, or Emil as you refer to him. What else can you tell me about this man?
Forgive me, Lady Rhea. I haven't seen my brother ever since my mother and I left House Bartels years ago, so I don't have much to tell. Back then, he was such a sweet boy, but he's completely different now, and I'm not sure as to why.
Unacceptable! You mean to tell me that ever since you enrolled at the monastery, you and Yuritsa have not been in contact with one another despite being related? I find that notion ridiculous. Clearly your love for that fiend prevents you from exposing the truth about him. You will come with me for questioning this instant.
Everyone is taken back from the Archbishop's cold and imposing words, and Mercedes is clearly scared to go with Rhea. Annette then perks up and says,
Please, Lady Rhea, Mercy would never lie to anyone. If she doesn't know what happened to Professor Yuritsa, I promise you she's telling the truth.
Constance also chimes in.
To think that you would accuse my dear Mercedes of deceit is unthinkable. I have known Miss Martret since I was but a child, and she has been honest and pure to a fault. We may have been separated for substantial length of time, but that hasn't—
Silence! I have made my orders clear!
The entire student body freezes. Everyone is speechless, and some are genuinely frightened after hearing the Archbishop scream at them so fiercely. Sephiroth then breaks the silence by gently touching Mercedes' shoulder and escorting her back to the monastery, with everyone else still in shock over the Archbishop's outburst. Once all the captives are safe and secure, the entire student body gather in the main hall, waiting for Mercedes to return, discussing all that went down in the underground and going back and forth from talking about the Death Knight's identity to the way Rhea acted. Eventually, Mercedes does come back, and the group quickly surrounds her, Constance and Annette rushing to her side and asking about what happened and if she's okay.
Oh, God's mercy! I was so worried about you! Are you hurt? Did they do anything to you? If they so much as ruffled a single hair on your head, so help me,
Oh, don't worry, Annette. I'm just fine. It's nothing really.
Mercedes, how can you brush it off like a mere slap on the wrist? The way the Archbishop addressed you is completely out of line. You should be furious at her conduct.
Now, Constance. There's no need to be so upset. I'm sure she just was worried about Sitri and Flame. Wouldn't you be angry if your loved ones were also attacked? Oh, that reminds me, Professor. How is your mother doing? I hope she's okay. Perhaps I should bring her some baked treats. I'm sure that'll make her feel much better.
My mother is fine, Mercedes, and thank you for offering, but there's no need to go that far. I'm more worried about you. I've never seen Rhea so hostile, and you didn't deserve to be treated that way or kept for as long as you were.
The professor is right, Mercedes. There's no need to try and excuse the Archbishop for her actions. Such deplorable behavior is hardly fitting for someone of her disposition, especially not towards you, for you have done no wrong.
You can't act like this isn't a big deal, Mercedes. I understand that because of your connection to Yuritsa, the church would want more information, but I can't believe that Lady Rhea would treat you in such a shameful manner. It's just not right.
Mercedes, I know I'm not the best at these kinds of things, but if you are upset or need help, we're all here for you. Thank you, everyone. It's so sweet of you to be so worried about me, but there's no need to fret. Everything's been resolved, and I truthfully just want things to go back to normal.
Despite Mercedes brushing off the ordeal like it's nothing and smiling brightly as usual, the group is clearly concerned for her, and everyone can tell that something is off. With Byleth noticing that Mercedes' hands are shaking, she then looks to the three lords, who are standing back as the others tend to Mercedes. Claude seems worried, and Ellegaard has the usual stern look about her, but Dimitri's expression is what catches Byleth off guard. His face is that of pure hatred and malice, looking almost twisted and filled with abhorrence. But before Byleth can do anything, one of the knights relays a message that Setheth wishes to see her. As Byleth makes their way to meet with Setheth, he is currently arguing with Rhea regarding Mercedes' interrogation.
How troublesome that we learnt very little about Yuritsa. Although if he's working with the enemy, then it's fair to suspect that some of them may be assembled within the monastery as we speak.
Troubling as it may be, what I find most disturbing is your assertion towards that young lady. There was no need to display such hostility towards her and interrogate Mercedes for that long. In the end, she was telling the truth. She knew very little about Yuritsa ever since she and her mother left House Bartels.
I may have lost my temper slightly. However, it's better to be completely sure than risk an incident like this again. Besides, I can hardly trust a human on their word. They're treacherous in nature and can never be dependable.
Why do you view humanity with such prejudice? Is this because of what happened during the War of Heroes? Rhea, you can't seriously hold the actions that occurred millennia ago against humanity as a whole. That is completely out of line and a dangerous way of thinking.
I find it strange, Setheth. You accuse me of being harsh, yet you have frequently shown considerable distrust towards others of the Professor if any evidence is to go off of. Not to mention how protective you are of Flame, to the point where you will not let her get close to those you deem unsuitable. It seems you don't trust your own daughter to make the appropriate judgment with whom she spends her time with.
Setheth's eyes pierce Rhea fiercely, the feelings of shock, malice and betrayal filling his heart.
That was uncalled for, Rhea. If you'll excuse me, I must return to my quarters. It has been a difficult day for us all.
Byleth arrives in Setheth's office shortly after he returns from confronting Rhea, and he thanks the Professor as usual. Flame joins Byleth's respective house, and the next day Rhea informs Byleth that next month will be the Battle of the Eagle and Lion. The only difference here is that Jeralt, instead of being preoccupied with his own mission, is taking the month off to look after Sitri due to the Death Knight incident, with Sitri insistent on observing the battle between the houses. At first, Rhea is against this, but Sitri would love to see such a historic event firsthand, especially since Byleth will be taking part, and would feel safer by Rhea's side, along with Setheth and Jeralt being there too, so Rhea agrees. Once they all leave, Byleth and family heads to Jeralt's office, and Sitri talks to them both in private about wanting them to train her and become stronger. The two of them instantly turn down the idea since she's so frail, and doing any sort of intense exercise could be dangerous, but it's because of that reason Sitri wants to become stronger, as hearing all these stories from the people at the monastery and the students has made her desire to see the outside world simply palpable. Plus she feels guilty for what happened to Manuela and Flame and wants to protect the ones she loves. Jeralt is still iffy about the idea, but Byleth backs up her mother, explaining that without Sitri, Manuela would be dead right now, plus they don't intend to spend their entire lives at the monastery. In the end, they convince Geralt to agree to train Sitri along with Byleth, but they make it clear to Sitri that they'll take things very slowly and that they can't let Rhea know about this or she will flip. And that's where we'll end things for now. Thank you all so much for seeing this through to the end. I hope you enjoyed the first part of this fanfiction. Next time we'll cover everything leading up to the battle in the Holy Tomb, and from there, if we reach our like goal of 2,000 likes, I shall make follow-ups for all 4 pathways. Please let me know what you thought in the comments. I'd love to get feedback on this what-if scenario, and feel free to share any ideas you have about how the story could continue. I would like to take this time to say the biggest thank you to all the incredible voice actors who provided their performances for this video. You all went above and beyond in delivering your lines with such valor, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. So, Goosaphone, Lucky, Maggiefall, Mystic Blue, Shadow Ryuga, Comrio, Zane, Chris, Ephemeral Blitz, Savior Dragon for the win, Joey Pals, and Natty. I know I've said this many times, but seriously, thank you all so much for making all this possible. Each of you are just amazing. Please be sure to give this video a like and subscribe too, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Discord and Amino, Twitch where I live stream 6 times a week, and I would very much appreciate it if you donated to my Patreon to help make these videos possible and receive some additional bonuses for doing so. And of course, I'd like to say the absolute biggest thank you to all my patrons who helped make these videos possible, been helping me all this time, whether it be through feedback, through voice acting, all of it, all the support. You guys are absolutely amazing. I love you so much. Seriously, like, I can't believe that, with the holiday coming up, too many games, I should finally be able to see you guys in person. Oh, it's going to be so amazing. Thank you all this time for helping me grow my channel, just grow everything. All the feedback, all the multiplayer stuff, all the live streams, all the work that we've done together, just, oh my god. You people are so beautiful, so amazing, and I love every single one of you. Thank you for making all this possible, for making all that I've done possible, and for being such an important part of my life. Thank you all so much. I really do love you all. And I'd like to say a very special thank you to Shadow Dragon, Wolf Fox, Lucina21, K-Dog, Degenerate Peach, Chaos Saberlight, VC Videos 100, Midnight Castle, Maggiefall, Jeremy Redinger, Baronin8392, Daniel Hodgson, Twisted Scarecrow, Specky X3, Zenny Dragon, and Cameron Reynolds. Thank you all so much. I seriously love you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you all next time.